it's known that Roger Williams was under federal investigation. And other law enforcement officers
Ronald
were...
Williams or Rogers?
Ronald Williams was under federal investigation.
Okay, you said Rogers. It's
I'm
Ronald.
sorry, Ronald, yes, was under federal investigation, and that the police officers were afraid that Ronald was going to talk, implicate, and consequently indict others, other police officers, that is. So this was a hit. Now, we have to understand that there is no evidence whatsoever tying Rogers to this case. None. You can't find any. You find innuendos. He was brought to the restaurant to have dinner that evening, and that was it. There's no physical, there's no, I mean, nothing. But yet...
Because he said they couldn't find anything on his shoes, all of this blood, he had on white shoes, nothing, they didn't even have he didn't even have gunpowder on his hand.
That's right. Now, anytime the criminal justice system starts pushing and eliminating the time factors for a fair process of a trial, you know there's something wrong. You talked about the gun that was used to kill Ronald Williams. The fact that the gun was signed for by Antoinette Frank, the gun was signed out by Judge Frank Marullo, who happened to be Rogers' trial judge. None of this came in to play before the trial.
Well, you know, that's interesting, and we're going to get back to this. I just got to delve into this about the judge that presided over the case. Why do you think that happened? Because evidently he had some kind of connection to Antoinette. Do we know what kind of?
Well, I don't know of what the implications are, what connections he has, where I can verify it through documentation. There's a lot of rumors out there, and I won't feed them. But what I will say is this. It is a known fact that Frank Marullo has had serious questions on a number of occasions about his fairness, his validity, and what he does to certain people and crimes and what he does to others. There are some people that go into his courtroom and they walk in and walk right out. Nothing happens to them. When others are dragged in and are lied upon, and he sends them away. Many times put them on death row. Frank Marullo has not been a friend to black folks in New Orleans. You know, Frank Marullo refused to attend a hearing that Rogers' attorneys put together because they wanted to talk about the gun. They wanted the
gun that he signed over to Antoinette Frank.
There had to be an order ordering Frank Marullo to appear in court to testify. And from that testimony is what caused, partially helped to cause, Rogers to get a new trial. Now get this. They overturned the ad hoc judge reviewing the case, overturned the conviction, gave him a new trial. Immediately, the current district attorney, who was Canizero, who has taken over from Connie, went to the Fourth Circuit Court to fight that. Now, I don't know about politics here or anywhere else in the country, But politics in New Orleans has to be one of the worst relationships that ever existed. Why? Because the Fourth Circuit Court rubber stamps most of what the district court does, even if they are incorrect in what they do. They rubber stamp it.
Wow. Because it is a known fact, because I had another family here from New Orleans. I got a feeling I'm going to have more to come up here since they can't get the media other than, you, because you're like a one-man show. You're pretty much doing it on your own down there. In New Orleans, even when there is evidence of corruption, it is impossible to get an conviction overturned. That's on the books, am I right?
Yes. I mean, first of all, we have the factor that most of us don't have the understanding of the law enough to be able to push. But more than that, it is difficult to get attorneys to give you a fair hearing for an appeal. Then they play the game, they deal with time on it. They frustrate you. You see what I'm saying?
So is it like they're all in it together?
Yes.
Because they're defense attorneys, they're like in bed with the prosecutors and the judges.
Let me explain this to you, because I do this. I do this a lot. And you have to understand that there is a thing called officers of the court. The officers of the court are the defense attorney, the prosecuting attorney, the police, and the judge are all bound by oath to protect each other. So how do you defend yourself? How do you even compete with that going in on any situation? It's difficult. I mean, we get rare instances where we do prevail, but that's rare. It's difficult. It's a stacked deck that we're having to deal with. Now, I heard you ask, why did they want Rogers dead? Because of the old saying, dead men tell no tales. It is difficult for a dead person to defend themselves. So whatever the storyline that the MOPD or the courts give, that's the only story that will stick. Because the person is not here to defend themselves, or to have or cause someone else to defend them. So you're stuck with the story that the system gives you.
In most police academies, I have to say this, I know a lot of people don't know this, in most police academies they teach shoot to kill. Because if you shoot them in the arm, you shoot them anywhere else other than front and center mass, you take the chance on a lawsuit.
Yes.
You shoot to kill. Because you don't have to worry about retaliation.
Yes. Now, it's an interesting fact that we have a situation where some of the original petition for a new trial has survived the Fourth Circuit Court. But Rogers is still on death row.
And why do you think that is so?
Because they're afraid to bring this man off of death row, because he'll have, we're talking about 20, 21 years that this man has been fighting by himself for the most part to be heard, to get another bite at the apple, to get a new trial. And now he has been successful at that. So if he's done this off of death row, what would he do in general population? They're trying to hog-tie the man to keep him from defending himself.
Absolutely.
Exactly what's happening.
Because we had a hard time getting an interview because He's been in jail, what, 21
1
years?
year.
He only gets 1 hour a day. That's worse than an animal. They're institutionalizing him, so that's worse than an animal. 1 hour a day out of his cell.
And the problem with that is we have too many black folk in this country who have positions of power for us not to be up in arms pushing the system to make these changes. You know, it's absurd that in 2016 we're still being treated like we were treated before the Jim Crow years. In 2016, we're still looked upon as chattel slavery. With all of the educated black folks we have in this country, we ought to be able to make greater strides in whatever we're doing. And the more we move forward, the faster we slide back.
Why do you think the politicians in New Orleans, because I'm sure that there are some African American politicians that you all have possibly voted for in hopes of helping. What happens once they get there, once they get the positions?
When they get into the system, they start feeding from the trough. And that becomes good to them. Their living standards increase. Their status increases. They don't want to lose it. Now they don't want to be denied this.
So they're bought off.
So they're bought and paid for.
Wow. Which is one of the reasons why, well, no, it's not one of, it's all of the reasons why that we're still behind. Because we send these people, we put them in office, and then they sell us out, you know. So, Mr. West, with you being around so long, and then we're going to talk more about Roger's case, but I just got it because I'm into this deep. With you being around so long, and I just got this thing about politicians selling out because it's happening more and more. What do we do? Because our sons are being killed, just like something just happened in New Orleans either yesterday or the day before. They're being gunned down by Caucasians, and they're being let go an hour later. What do we need to do as it relates to these politicians that we send there, and then it's like they stay there for 30 years?
There was a black mayor in Jackson, Mississippi, who died a couple of years ago by the name of Chokwe Lumumba. Chokwe Lumumba was a member of the Republic of New Africa. Had been working at least 30, 40 years with that group. He also worked in defending black folks for causes that this system would place on them. He was able to become mayor. In his position as mayor, he began to move with this plan called the plebiscite that the Republic of New Africa had introduced 40 years or more ago. The plebiscite, all it does is talk about organizing your communities. From the organizing of communities, you then go to organizing your districts, your political subdivisions. And you keep this moving right along. I believe that Chokwe was murdered. They claim he had a cold and he died from a cold. But I believe he was murdered because he was working the plebiscite in Jackson. He had both black and white voters backing him, pushing him. Because when he was elected, he told them, he said, I'm going to show you what democracy really is and how it can affect your life. And in 1 year, he was moving the people of Jackson to becoming essentially self-sufficient. Now you ask, what can we do? We have to put down this need for us to be accepted in a part of the system. And we have to create our own system. We don't have to go back and discover the wheel. It's already here. We just have to utilize it. If I may go to one of the great ancestors who did such a fine job in organizing here in America, is none other than the Honorable Marcus Garvey. We have to be able to take those things that we've learned from those that have gone before us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. And we have to quit hoping and praying that someone else is going to make some changes and start getting enough strength to make these changes ourselves. We can't ask somebody else to do something that we're not willing to do for ourselves.
It's so true. It's so true. I'm going to stop you right there because we need to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The trail here.
Hi. My name is Tamara, host of Real Talk with Tamara, owner of Tamara's Productions Network. I'm proud to say that my network is expanding. We're producing reality shows, TV shows, and just like I produce my own TV talk show, Real Talk with Tamara, and record it, I'm also doing the same with other TV talk shows. So, if you have a TV idea, if you have an idea and you want it on TV, give me a call. We have a gang of producers over here that would love to help you to get your message out. If you're looking for a studio to record your shows in, look no further. We have a big new studio that we would love to have you at. If you have a business and you would like to advertise on Real Talk with Tamara or on Tamara's Productions Network, give me a call. If you need a commercial, don't worry about that. I have a team of experts that can produce you a professional commercial for your business. As I said, be on the lookout for Tamara's Productions Network. We're on the rise. Welcome back to Real Talk with Tamara. On today's show, I've been speaking with Mr. Wes Johnson. We've been talking about Roger's Lacaze case. I'm sure all of you have heard about Roger's case. Roger was convicted back in 1995 of a crime that it seems that he didn't do. You know, I've looked into it. We've had many others look into it. This happened in New Orleans. Of course, you know, Antoinette Franks was involved. She was an NOPD officer at the time. It's documented that she was mentally ill. She was never even supposed to be on the police department. But since then, we found out the corruption that has happened. And Rogers was set up. Now we're getting into why he was set up. And it's like his mom says, like a cess hole. Am I right?
Yes, it's yeah, it's toxic.
Toxic. Okay, Mr. West. Now, what type of manipulation was found with the evidence in this case? How was it tampered?
Quite a bit. It was quite a bit. First of all, beginning with the trial itself, Marullo had an obligation to recuse himself because there were there was too much entanglement between himself and Antoinette Franks, especially with the murder weapon. The murder weapon was released from NOPD to Antoinette Franks through Frank Marullo, who was the judge. Now, the property, the way that's handled is when weapons are confiscated, the first people that get an opportunity to receive them are police officers. And they have to go through the formality of a judge signing that out to the police officer. Once that's done, it's fine. Well, he signed that particular weapon out to her. And then a week or so before she used it on the hit, she called or she made a report that it had been stolen. Now, the interesting thing about this gun, and this is a reoccurring gun that just keeps popping up, they could never find it after the murders. But several years later, it pops up when they arrest Adam Frank, Antoinette's brother, in a northern Louisiana parish. And after they arrested him and they put the gun out looking for it to see if it had been stolen, Orleans Parish responded to say that they're interested in that gun because it seems to fit the description of the gun used in a murder. The northern Louisiana parish begins to process the weapon to send it to Orleans Parish. And somewhere between these two parishes, poof, the gun disappeared.
Wow, conveniently.
And it's never been found. So these kind of antics have just gone on throughout Roger's entire trial, in his entire time on death row. Even to the fact that I was mentioning the fact that he has a new trial, but they still keep him on death row. We talked about that earlier. But you talked about some of the things that was happening that they can't quite say why it happened or what led it to happen. Here's one. Evidence that Miss Frank, which is Antoinette Frank, owned a 9mm gun. It was reported stolen 10 days before the murders, was not only relevant to Mr. Lacaze's motion to recuse Judge Marullo, but was a material favorable evidence. There are times when the state suppressed evidence that Antoinette Frank's brother, Adam Franks, had motive and opportunity to kill Ronald Williams. This whole entire case is just one big cover-up.
Now, he said that Antoinette Frank, that's what I wanted to ask you, that Adam Franks had threatened to kill him a couple times, or one time, or whatever. Why did he threaten him?
Okay, what had happened was, Adam was at the restaurant frequently. It was known openly by the police officers there, including Ronald Williams, that Adam carried a gun, and he also carried a police radio.
And I just want to insert this. I got to interject this. On the national shows, you see where they portrayed Rogers as this bad child. Rogers was 18 years old. He was doing what probably 18-year-old, getting into what 18-year-old boys getting into. He didn't have to be a robber or a killer. But on the national shows, they was quick to say that he was the one driving the police cars, and she had him driving the police cars and things of that nature. It's like Rogers was leading her. She was so mentally ill, they wanted to make it seem that Rogers was leading her. But they said nothing about her brother. He was the one that was driving the cars and not Rogers, and he was the one that had the police radio.
Yeah.
I just had to interject that because you all have been manipulated. I just had to straighten that up because I know the first thing they're going to say, he was driving the police car, but it's just because they don't know.
Yeah. Okay. From the writ that was submitted to the Fourth Circuit, the state suppressed evidence that Antoinette Frank's brother, Adam Frank, had motive and opportunity to kill Ronald Williams and was under investigation by NOPD. Roughly 2 months before the restaurant murders, NOPD officers Davis discovered that Adam Frank was wanted for attempted manslaughter. Now, knowing this, Officer Davis reported that Adam Franks was known to carry a gun in the police radio and was accompanying his sister on her special duty. Around this time, Adam was spending the time there, and Officer Stanley and Officer Ronald both worked off-duty security detail at the restaurant. Officer Williams and Officer Stanley approached Antoinette Frank and told her that her brother could no longer spend time at the restaurant. Antoinette reacted angrily, swearing at both officers as they ejected Adam from the restaurant. It goes on to talk about how Adam had threatened to kill the officers for putting him off of the property. So all of these things were not allowed at the trial. Marullo made sure, first of all, he had a court-appointed attorney, I believe,
Yes.
and they made sure that the court-appointed attorney, who I must say never, ever tried a capital murder case before this, he did not know the procedures, did not know what to do. So they made sure that they would hamstring Rogers by giving him someone who was incompetent to even defend him. And then they came down on his attorney so hard, the attorney was scared to death because he didn't know what would happen to him. And I'm going to tell you, the understanding of people in New Orleans knew the character of the NOPD, that if they wanted you dead, you died. So it was a living threat to anyone who would even think about rubbing the NOPD the wrong way.
Because they knew they would be dead or railroaded.
Yes.
Because, like you said, the judges and the prosecutors and the police officers, they're all in that together.
Yes, all of them. So, you know, all I'm saying is, well, first of all, let me say this. The NOPD, the political structure in New Orleans, the DA, and many of the judges do not want the truth of this case to come to light. If the truth comes to light, a lot of heads are going to have to roll. And there is an entire culture in New Orleans within the criminal justice system that would have to be totally revamped. I was part of the Department of Justice investigation in 2010 when they came in to investigate the Danziger Bridge massacre. They came in only to investigate that. But it was because of the organization that I was the head of and the people that I've worked with for so many years all came together and pressured the Department of Justice into broadening and expanding their investigation, because we told them you can't investigate the Danziger Bridge in a vacuum, because what has happened happens all the time throughout the whole entire NOPD, which they found in their findings letter, which is their report after the investigation. They crucified the city of New Orleans and the New Orleans Police Department. And that's why they put them under a consent decree.
Wow, Mr. West. I mean, you've given me more information than I could have even, and like I said, the good thing about it is it's all documented.
Yes.
The truth is right there. All they got to do is go look at it. They don't even have to look for it because it's right there. But this is a cover-up case, and it's an unfortunate thing that a young man has been in jail his whole young life. His family has been fighting for him and is still fighting for him. He was taken off of death row. I never heard anything like that. He was taken off of death row because of the holes in his case, yet they refused to take him off of death row. Isn't that like a contempt of court?
Well, it should be if it isn't, but unfortunately, you have powers to be that run Angola, number one. And then you have the DA in Orleans Parish who has persuaded Angola to put it on hold until after they go through their proceedings. See what I'm saying? It's all about a telephone call away. And they can do anything with that phone call.
What do you think it's going to take for Rogers to come home? What is it going to take?
Well, to begin with, it's going to take more people like yourself. It's going to take more people like your audience to get involved. If it's no more than letter writing, telephone calling, or just showing up at various points and times when we had rallies. These are the kinds of things that bring attention to what has happened, brings attention to the deficiencies that is in the system, and what it's going to take to make a difference and make a change. And I always say this to people: whether this is your case personally, or whether this is someone else's case that you're helping out on, all of this is nothing more than you making a deposit for interest to be accrued, because if you're black and you live long enough, you're going to be faced with some of this. At some point in time, it's going to knock on your door. So if you're already committed, if you're already connected, then it's easier, because people who have done this will be able to help you navigate the problems in that highway and byway that you're going to have to run across.
Now, with the new, you all have a new governor.
Yes.
I heard a lot of people say that there's hope with him. Can you just kind of elaborate on that?
Well, I always say hope is like dope. It just stays there. I mean, you're always hoping, and you need another fix at some point in time. But Edwards is the new governor, and let me say, Louisiana, first of all, politically is one of the worst political cesspools in the country. And I don't care who is in office. Poor people are at the mercy of big business. Big business are the ones that put the politicians into positions, and they're put into positions to take care of big business, the wealthy. I mean, we just finished a presidential election that's caught everybody looking the other way, shocked and dismayed. But it is the wealthy that runs this country and determines what's going to happen. Now, not sounding defeatist, what is it that we can do? We have to continue to fight harder and stronger than we did yesterday, or the day before, or last week, or last year. Because the more we keep pounding away, the weaker that system is going to become until we're able to organize ourselves in such a way that we can put in place what we need. You know, we have a lot of black politicians. We have a lot of black attorneys. If they would only work towards revolution, when I say revolution, I'm talking about the type of revolution that takes the knowledge of law, spreads it throughout the people in a way that we're able to access the political system and make it favorable for us.
Ain't no cooking like country cooking.
Ain't no cooking like country cooking.
My name is Homer Fullerton. I'm the owner of Country Cooking Soul Food Restaurant, located at 1128 Winchester Road in the heart of Whitehaven. If you want some good down-home cooking, come to Country Cooking Soul Food Restaurant, because ain't nobody cooking like country cooking.
Ain't no cooking like country cooking. Yeah.
Bloodhound Private Investigators. We're the investigators you call when you need answers. Are you trying to find a missing loved one or solve a cold case homicide? Or are you trying to find a deadbeat parent? Call Bloodhound Investigators. We'll get right on it for you. Do you need background checks for your business or employee? Or maybe you feel that your spouse is cheating on you again? We will do a thorough investigation for you, and we deliver what we promise. So make sure you call Bloodhound Investigators at 901-323-2333 because we're already on it.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Tamara. Before we ended the show, I wanted to give Miss Alice an opportunity, this is Roger's mom, to end it, to say what she needed to say before, on her behalf, on his behalf also, and his children. Go ahead, Miss Alice.
Yes, first of all, I want to say thank you again, Tamara, for having me here. And although Rogers came on the phone today, it is a possibility that he may have to go to Camp J, which is the worst camp on that road, given this interview. But Rogers is a strong, willing black man. He also is an innocent black man, and he's willing to do whatever he needs to do to get his freedom. He have missed his whole life with his 3 children, Rogers, Roderick, and Little Rogers. And it's time for him to come home. It's time for those who sit and wait and choose not to say anything. And I'm going to say this here right here. I'm guilty because a long time ago, people used to come to me and tell me certain things about NOPD or how their kids was wrongfully accused or maybe shot or anything. And I didn't pay any attention to it. But it took 1995 for them to come to my house and knock on my door. And I became the story. So I say to you all, watch your kids, listen to your kids. Do not let them be the solid one as we were when I was small. We couldn't say anything. We had to keep our mouths shut. But listen to your children, because when Rogers came to me and told me several stories concerning what was going on with his life, I could have turned over and dropped dead. But I'm here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, joining me tonight is Kevin Hayden, a former police officer with the New Orleans Police Department. He ended up testifying against fellow officers with that department for the FBI after Hurricane Katrina. He's been interviewed for RT several times, including with his one-time crush, Lucy Kavanaugh. But tonight we're talking to him to see why he quit the force and why he is now such a passionate liberty activist and Ron Paul supporter. He runs the website truthisTreason.net and is active with his local meetup group for Ron Paul in Oklahoma. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good to be here.
So let's start with your personal background. How did you end up on the police force in New Orleans in the first place?
Well, I was waiting to turn 21 really for several years prior to that. Really wanted to be a cop. Didn't know if I wanted to be, federal agent, DEA, but knew I wanted to do something. And out of the blue.
Well, hold on. What was behind that? Because this interview is not about just the mechanics of your story, but the mechanics of your transformation. So tell us, why did you want to be a police officer? What was the appeal of that? What service were you looking to provide for people?
When I was 18, I actually had a girlfriend that ended up dying in a one-car accident, and it was due to drinking and driving. And that really started me on my path to become a police officer, wanting to be that voice of change and to help people. And as cliche as it sounds, I really wanted to kind of change a community, and I thought being a police officer would be one of the quickest ways to do that.
And did the experience live up to your expectation?
It did at the beginning. I sunk into the culture of law enforcement. My first several years, I worked on a proactive street crimes unit. We targeted guns, drugs, stuff like that, and I had a blast. I thought I was doing the best thing for the city, enforcing most of the drug laws, warrants, kicking in doors, and I just lived and breathed doing that. And then one day I just kind of woke up.
Well, hold on. There's another aspect of your work with the police force that I want to point out for the sake of our listeners, because the liberty movement, the broader freedom movement in the United States, full of people that understand that law enforcement officers are the mechanism of oppression of a citizenry by the government, but also they're providing a legitimate service and they're for legitimate reasons, and that a lot of people in the police force are providing services that would be provided even if we didn't have a government monopoly on the use of force, services for the public safety, for property rights preservation that would exist in a free market. I just wanted to point that out because you were also a detective in the robbery and property crimes division. Can you see that there was a sort of difference between that and the work that you did on the narcotics task force?
Well, I had such genuine goals when I first started. Graduated top of my class, really excelled in legal and interpreting the law, and that kind of carried me into it. And I started out with the best intentions, and then once I got into the culture, I just kind of fell into the worst aspects of it. In New Orleans, it's full of corruption. I would say probably 70% of the department should probably be fired or indicted. And so it became a culture, a lifestyle, making easy arrests, making bad arrests. I don't know how many of those I witnessed down there.
Was there like a pressure to rack up statistics?
That was a big thing. I'd say just about every department has an unspoken quota, especially when it comes to arrest. With our task force, we had a 5 arrest minimum goal for every night.
Wow,
and many times
5 arrest minimum goal for an individual officer in the narcotics unit every night.
Correct. We had a 2-man team.
So what happens to an officer that's out on the street who's going, crap, I've only got 2 arrests for tonight, and it's midnight, I'm off my shift in a few hours. What happens in those kinds of situations?
That's that path that starts taking officers down the easy road, instead of actually trying to make a difference, maybe arresting a potential burglar, and using drug laws to get him arrested. They would target college kids, namely. It was easy, or tourists.
And minorities, of course, as is always the case in the drug war.
Right. Well, in New Orleans, you have a population of 70% or more black, and the colleges that were down there, quite a few colleges, predominantly rich white kids from the Northeast, just moved to the big city. And so they would just start nickel and diming everybody to rack up 10 or 15 arrests a night.
Wow.
And many times, if you made your quota, you could just go ahead and leave shift early. Or if you got a gun,
You could wait. So you're saying a cop on a shift, like an 8-hour shift, expected to make a quota of arrests. If they make those arrests before their shift is up, they get off work early.
Happened a lot. And I mean, unless something big was going on that they just needed.
Right, obviously. But I mean, talk about a
warped.
warped incentive system. I mean, this is what happens when you take the free market out of the accountability. Because in a free market, communities still want police to provide for the public safety. They still want private security to protect property rights. But when you take that and you give the government a monopoly on that in law enforcement, you get this kind of perverse incentive system for the officers that we supposedly trust with the public safety on the streets. I mean, this is nuts.
Right. That was across the board. If you arrested somebody with a gun and dope, you'd get a whole day off. We called it a gun day.
Whoa.
And it was
no
a paid day off.
Now, I just want to point something else out here, just to make it clear, because you said that officers weren't making arrests of potential armed robbers or violent criminals or people that were committing real crimes because drug crime arrests were easier. So what you're telling me is that we, the public, or rather the public in New Orleans, trusted the police department to provide for the public safety, to protect property rights, so on and so forth, and yet because of this incentive system, the resources that our tax dollars or their tax dollars go to fund this department are then, the resources generated for them are then diverted away from legitimate services that a police department would provide in providing for the public safety and protecting property rights, and diverted into violating individual rights, violating privacy rights, and carrying out the continued racism of the war on drugs. Is that a fair description of what was going on?
That's pretty fair, except your first part when you said the public trusted the police department.
Okay, fair enough. But maybe not in New Orleans.
Long-time corruption. Everybody knows, cops down there are just dirty. There's more police officers from New Orleans on death row than any department in the world. They've been arrested for murder, for heroin trafficking, cocaine trafficking, armed robberies, murder of other police officers. It's a very dirty, corrupt department in general. So the public knows this, and they thrive on that. And they hated the police officers because the department never gave them a reason to trust them through brutality and corruption, outright theft,
failure to provide the supposed legitimate services.
The basic serve and protect. There was no serving, and there was little protecting going on. Obviously, when we would have a rash of robberies or something, cases, there was a good attempt to solve them, but then even you start getting into 60 days or so on an open case, and hey,
I could get a whole day off for arresting a guy with drugs and a gun.
Well, you start getting pressure on cases for detectives, and then they just start picking anybody who's got that MO or gets arrested for another armed robbery. If he fit the description of a young black male in a white T-shirt, well, go ahead and pin 7 other robberies on him and let the courts deal with it. And then the courts down there are such a joke. So you have murderers that literally spend 4 years in prison or Lego.
Now, I just want to point out that oftentimes some of us more philosophically extreme libertarians, some of us who take the non-aggression principle seriously and look at what is a police department. And when you really boil it down, you have to say, well, this is an armed gang that is imposing its will on the people in a given area. And it's not true of all police departments. Obviously, NOPD being far and above for corruption and all these other problems. But when we characterize police departments as armed gangs of thugs, even though there are many among them who want to provide the legitimate services, as you yourself started out as when you joined the force, it really makes it seem like a very obvious, almost mild observation now to say the New Orleans Police Department is simply a gang of violent thugs imposing their will and exercising a form of tyranny over the city of New Orleans. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. There are some departments with New Orleans probably at the top, along with Chicago and a few others,
right,
that they are the largest street gang in that area. There's no other way to describe it.
And in many cases, they're actually committing more crimes than the civilian population in its entirety,
Yeah,
especially
in
with
some
drugs
areas,
and a lot of law enforcement officers that take advantage of their position to enrich themselves through various means of corruption, committing drug distribution crimes themselves. I mean, I want with your personal story and give you a chance to share the really important transformation that you experienced. But let's start with what happened with you in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina.
Katrina itself was really like a bad zombie movie gone wrong. One of the big things that I'll never forget, we had like California Highway Patrol along with NYPD and Dallas police patrolling the streets. Military Humvees everywhere with infrared scopes. I mean, everything, the whole shebang. And our jail had been flooded. The central lockup had flooded out, and they'd moved most of the prisoners. A few of them died in their cells with the water. But our new jail was the Amtrak train station. They set up several kennels. I don't have a better word for it, but they set up these like 10-foot by 10-foot kennels, and that was jail cells. It was right on the platform there for the trains. And you had the NYPD's correctional department really running the thing with some help from Border Patrol, California Highway Patrol, just a handful of different agencies. Immigration and Customs were there. And to me, it was kind of my first awakening of starting to ask, what is going on here? Why do we have all these things? Why can't our department or the sheriff's department handle this? And as things progressed, over the next probably 2 years until 2007 is when I first heard Ron Paul speak and first heard about him and really started looking into what led me down the rabbit hole.
So you had this dilemma in front of you. You had all of these problems that you saw in the police force. You saw the problems after Hurricane Katrina and all the different agencies coming in. And it was like, if I may, sort of just a problem or a giant Rubik's Cube or a big lock in front of you. And then the message of Ron Paul, the message of liberty came into your mind, into your heart. And it was like a key, was it not, that sort of unlocked the door and it explained all of these things?
It really was. That's a good way to describe it. It was like the world, the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders when I really started looking at things for what they really were, and I started looking at the aspects of federal funding and why the police department is doing what it's doing and their motives. And I really tried to address some of those issues. I started asking questions. And of course, like the military, if you ask why, you get on everybody's bad side. They just, shut up and follow orders. And that's how the department was. And then I started asking my partners, why are we doing this or doing that? And it ultimately ended up into a fist fight one night. I was trying to talk to him about drug laws, the war on drugs, all sorts of topics. And
so just you having a friendly conversation with a fellow officer, challenging the paradigm of the drug war and law enforcement, and
Correct.
It goes to fists.
A fist fight with me on the scene. There was another one that I had two people I was questioning. We had them in custody. And I took one into the interrogation room, was talking to him. And when I came back out, the second one, of course, all my partners were standing out there, was bleeding. And so when I tried to figure out who had hit him or why he was bleeding, that turned into another fight where we had captains and lieutenants breaking up the fight because I was protecting the suspect. Honestly, it wasn't a good guy, but he still has rights. And that was one of the big moments that really pushed me over the edge to question things. And so I'm not on the right side here.
So what was the conclusion that you came to that ultimately led you to quit the force?
I helped out with the Ron Paul campaign in 07 and 08. I was still a police officer. And after about a year and a half of that, January 14th of 2009, I'd had 2 or 3 days off. I don't recall. And over that weekend, I just did a lot of thinking. And Monday, I walked into my station and just handed my captain my resignation. I said, I'm not going to be a part of this machine. I'm not going to be another cog in the ever-growing police state. I am that jackbooted thug that you see on TV. And I certainly didn't want to be friends with them. I didn't want any part of it, and I didn't want to be associated with it anymore.
This has been a Tamara's Productions.